You are only as good as the money you have. That is what I realized growing up. Let me explain. My name is Aaron. I am 28 years old. And if there is one thing my life has taught me, it is that money brings people closer, but only until they figure out they cannot take it for themselves. I was labeled the trust fund kid early on. My parents worked incredibly hard to build a fortune, and they wanted to ensure I had a stable future. They set up a massive trust fund for me. Sounds great, right? But let me tell you, having money does not mean you are rich in the things that matter. In fact, my life often felt lonelier than I would admit. People approached me with big smiles and warm compliments, but their intentions were as clear as day. Back in high school, classmates suddenly wanted to be my best friend because they assumed I would throw wild parties or pay for trips. Spoiler alert, I did not. I was careful about spending because I understood the value of what my parents had earned. I also knew how easily it could all fall apart if I was reckless. It got worse in college. The moment my parents' wealth became common knowledge, people treated me differently. I had guys constantly asking for loans they would never repay, and girls acting interested, but it never felt genuine. It was exhausting. I was not the kind of guy who enjoyed casual dates or hookups. I wanted a meaningful relationship, but the money made it impossible to trust anyone. At first, I tried to blend in. I thought maybe if I acted more normal, things would be different. I went to a few parties, bought drinks for people, and tried to fit in, but even then, it was never enough for them. I was expected to be this stereotype of a spoiled, rich kid, someone who would go over the top just to impress others. When I did not, they quickly lost interest. I realized they were never friends. They were opportunists. By the time I graduated, I had developed thick walls around myself. I had acquaintances, but no real friends, and honestly, it hurt. I would sit alone in my dorm, scrolling through pictures of classmates celebrating birthdays or game nights, wondering why I could not be part of something like that. I told myself it was fine, that people only wanted me for my money and it was better to keep my distance. My parents, meanwhile, were always supportive. They encouraged me to work hard and not rely on the trust fund, so I started helping with my father's company. It was not easy, but I learned to appreciate the value of hard work. It also gave me a purpose, something to focus on, instead of dwelling on how fake people were. But deep down, I still wanted connection. I wanted to believe there were people out there who could see past the money and see me for who I was. Little did I know that hope would lead me straight into the biggest mistake of my life. I met Ashley at a graduation party, and if I am being honest, I was not expecting anything significant to come out of that night. Parties were never my thing. I usually went out of obligation or because someone convinced me it would be good for me. But that night was different. Amidst the crowd and loud music, there she was. Ashley. She was standing by the snack table laughing with a friend, completely unaware of how much she was about to change my life. We struck up a conversation and it just clicked. She seemed different. She was funny, relaxed, and not overly concerned about what anyone thought of her. Unlike most people I had met, she did not act like she knew who I was or care about where I came from. I remember thinking, maybe this is someone who sees me, not the trust fund kid. We exchanged numbers, and by the end of the night, I was already looking forward to our first date. For our first date, I kept it simple. I took her to McDonald's. Yeah, not exactly romantic, but I wanted to see how she would react to my surprise. She did not flinch. No complaints, no side-eye, nothing. In fact, she seemed to have a great time. We sat there for hours talking about everything. Our favorite movies, childhood memories, dreams for the future. It felt real. For the first time in years, I felt like I could be myself around someone. Ashley quickly became a huge part of my life. She was smart, driven, and had this natural charm that made people gravitate toward her. She worked at a tech company and seemed to love her job. She never asked for anything extravagant, which only made me trust her more. When I tried to buy her gifts, she would politely refuse, saying, "We are not married yet, save it for when it matters." That kind of thinking was rare, and it made me fall even harder for her. A month into dating, I introduced her to my parents. That was a big deal for me. I had never brought anyone home before. My parents adored her immediately. She was warm, respectful, and seemed genuinely interested in them. Looking back, I realize now that she had a way of winning people over effortlessly. At the time, I thought it was just who she was. After a year, I proposed. It felt like the right thing to do. She had been by my side through everything. My parents even threw us an engagement party and surprised us with a gift. They added Ashley as a co-beneficiary of the trust fund. It was a massive gesture of trust and acceptance, and Ashley seemed genuinely touched. I was proud to have found someone who could fit so perfectly into my life. The wedding was everything I had hoped for, simple yet meaningful. She looked stunning, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found someone like her. For years, our life felt perfect. We traveled when we could, worked hard, and supported each other. My parents were thrilled with her, and often said how lucky I was to have found such a supportive wife. But as it turns out, the Ashley I fell in love with was not the Ashley I married. I still remember the moment it all unraveled. It was just another ordinary evening, or at least that is what I thought. I came home earlier than usual, carrying a bouquet of roses. I had decided to surprise Ashley, thinking maybe we needed to reconnect. Things had been different between us lately. She had grown distant after my parents passed away, but I chalked it up to her grieving in her own way. I thought, maybe this will cheer her up. Maybe this will bring us back to how we used to be. The house was quiet when I walked in, but something felt off. I heard faint noises from the living room and assumed Ashley was home. When I stepped inside, I saw Bob, our trustee, standing there with 2 suitcases by his side. For a moment, I froze, trying to make sense of the situation. "Bob, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My first thought was that this had something to do with the trust fund. Maybe there was an emergency. But before he could answer, Ashley appeared behind him, also carrying 2 suitcases. The look on her face told me everything. She was not surprised to see me. She was annoyed. "Oh," she said, her tone almost dismissive. "I guess we're doing this face to face. Fine, Aaron. I am leaving." I stood there stunned as she casually explained her plans like it was no big deal. She and Bob were going on a vacation to Italy and would be moving in together afterward. "I was going to leave a note," she said, like that would somehow make it better. "But I guess now we can just get this over with." She tossed the roses I had brought onto the table like they were nothing and kept talking. "I will file for divorce when I get back. Your parents left enough money in the trust fund for me to live comfortably, so do not make this harder than it needs to be. Bob is filing for divorce from Sandra, too, so it'll be a clean break for everyone." She said it all so matter-of-factly, like she was reading off a grocery list. I could barely process her words. This was my wife, the woman I had trusted, loved, and built a life with for 7 years, and she was throwing it all away. "Ashley, wait," I started to say, but she cut me off. "Aaron, do not make this a big deal. You will be fine. Trust me, this is for the best." And just like that, she walked out the door, leaving me standing there in disbelief. I heard their car start and then silence. That is the only way to describe the house after they left. A crushing, suffocating silence. For the next 2 days, I barely moved. I did not eat, shower, or even turn off the TV. I just sat there staring at nothing, trying to understand what had just happened. Every memory I had of Ashley played over and over in my mind, but now it felt like I was seeing her for the first time. The way she used to laugh at Bob's jokes a little too much at parties, the trips she took for work that always seemed too convenient, all the little things I had ignored or explained away were now screaming at me like a neon sign. "You missed this. You ignored this. This is your fault." By the 3rd day, I was a shell of myself. When the doorbell rang, I almost did not answer it, but whoever was on the other side was not giving up. They rang it over and over and then started knocking. A woman's voice yelled, "I know you're in there, Aaron. Open the door or I am not leaving." I dragged myself to the door, expecting Ashley, maybe back to gloat or make excuses. But it was not her. It was Sandra, Bob's wife. She stood there, her face a mix of anger and determination, and said, "Your wife ran off with my husband. Sitting around in this mess is not going to fix anything. Go shower. We need to talk." Before I could argue, she walked in, took one look at me, and said, "You stink." Then she practically shoved me toward the bathroom. It was the first time I had laughed in days. But little did I know, Sandra was about to show me just how far Ashley and Bob's betrayal went. When I walked back into the living room, freshly showered and feeling slightly more human, I found Sandra sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. The room was spotless, which was strange because I was sure it had been a disaster just an hour ago. "Sit," she said firmly, pointing to the chair across from her. I sat. Sandra wasted no time getting to the point. "I tried calling you for 2 days," she said, "but clearly you were too busy falling apart to pick up." Her tone was sharp, but I could tell she was holding back a deeper frustration. "So I came here myself. We have a problem, Aaron. A big one." She started explaining what had happened on her end. 2 days ago, Bob had walked out on her too, claiming he needed space and would be sending an assistant to pick up the rest of his things. Like me, she had been blindsided, but unlike me, she did not waste time grieving. Sandra had gone straight into investigator mode. "The first thing I did," she said, "was check Bob's computer. He's not exactly careful about covering his tracks, and his Facebook account was wide open." She paused, giving me a moment to let that sink in. And guess what I found? Messages. Lots of them. Between him and Ashley, going back years. Years. That word hit me like a punch. This was not a spur-of-the-moment affair. It was a calculated betrayal. Sandra did not stop there. She had gone through emails, financial records, and even their shared calendar. What she uncovered was worse than anything I could have imagined. "Bob has been embezzling money from your trust fund," she said flatly, "and Ashley helped him." I stared at her, not sure I had heard correctly. "What do you mean, helped him?" Sandra leaned forward, her eyes narrow. "I mean that your wife has been working with my husband to skim money off the top. Small amounts at first, so no one would notice, but over time they got greedy. They started taking bigger risks, and that's when they got sloppy. I have all the evidence right here." She pulled out a stack of documents and handed them to me. As I flipped through the papers, my hands began to shake. Bank transfers, fake invoices, and even emails between Bob and Ashley discussing how to cover their tracks. It was all there. "Why would she do this?" I muttered, more to myself than to Sandra. Sandra sighed, her frustration giving way to something softer. "Because she's selfish, Aaron, and so is Bob. People like them only care about themselves." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what she had uncovered was almost too much to process. But then Sandra's expression changed. Her jaw tightened, and she leaned forward again. "Here's the thing," she said. "We can do something about this. We can fight back." I was still in shock, but something about the determination in her voice snapped me out of my daze. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we take them down," she said. "They think they've won, that they can just walk away from this and live happily ever after. But they're wrong. We have the evidence, and we have the means to make their lives hell. Are you in or not?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away from all of it, to let Ashley and Bob deal with the mess they had created on their own. But the other part, the part that had been humiliated, betrayed, and left to pick up the pieces, wanted justice. No, more than that. I wanted them to pay. "I'm in," I said finally. Sandra nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Good. We start now." Over the next few days, Sandra and I worked tirelessly to build our case. She handled most of the heavy lifting, contacting lawyers, organizing the evidence, and planning our next steps. I followed her lead, grateful to have someone who knew what they were doing. Together we were a team, united by a shared goal, to expose the people who had betrayed us and make sure they faced the consequences. It was strange working so closely with Sandra. We were complete strangers before all this, but now it felt like we had known each other forever. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a bond forged in the fire of betrayal. And as we sat in my living room late one night, surrounded by piles of documents and legal papers, I realized something. For the first time in days, I felt hopeful. Ashley and Bob thought they could walk away unscathed. They were wrong. They had no idea what was coming for them. When Ashley and Bob returned from their vacation in Italy, they came back to chaos. I cannot say I was sad to see it unfold. Sandra and I had spent every moment of those 10 days preparing for this exact scenario. We had the evidence lined up, lawyers ready, and a plan in motion that would ensure neither of them got away with what they had done. I was at work when I got the call from Ashley. It was the first time she had contacted me since she walked out with her suitcases. Her voice was shrill, laced with panic. "What the hell is going on, Aaron?" she shouted. What do you mean by locking me out of my money? What does Bob mean by we're in trouble? Explain it to me now. I leaned back in my chair, a mix of satisfaction and dread settling in. Are you referring to the money my parents left? The money Bob has been using to fund your little getaways and whatever else you two have been up to? I asked calmly. If so, you might want to consult your lawyer, Ashley. You'll find that neither of you has access to any of it anymore. Her response was instant. You can't do this. I'm entitled to that money, Aaron. You don't understand. I cut her off. Ashley, I understand perfectly. You and Bob stole from me, and you thought I'd just sit back and let it happen. That's not how this works. I have to go now. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hung up before she could say another word. That evening, I was heading to my car when I saw her waiting outside my office building. She looked disheveled, a far cry from the polished woman I had known. She stepped in front of me, forcing me to stop. Aaron, please, she said, her voice cracking. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you, I replied, stepping around her. But she grabbed my arm, her desperation evident. Please, I don't know what's happening. Bob said you're trying to ruin us. Is that true? I need to hear it from you. I stared at her for a moment, debating whether to even entertain this conversation. You're not getting a cent, Ashley, I said finally. Not from the trust fund, not from me, not now, not ever. The look on her face was one I will never forget. Pure, unfiltered panic. You can't do this to me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How could you? How could I snapped. Ashley, you betrayed me. You lied to me. You stole from me. How could you? She started crying, but I was done being manipulated. I walked past her, got into my car, and drove off, leaving her standing there in the parking lot. Meanwhile, things were unraveling for Bob too. Sandra had made sure of it. She had leaked the news of his embezzlement to his company, along with a detailed explanation of how he had been siphoning funds. The company had no choice but to terminate him immediately. Clients started pulling out of contracts, and the company's reputation was in shambles. Bob was not just fired, he was blacklisted. It did not take long for the dominoes to start falling. With no job and mounting debts, Bob and Ashley were drowning. Sandra, ever the strategist, used her network to ensure neither of them found new employment easily. She even sent a recording of Ashley's confession to Ashley's company, making it clear that someone with such questionable ethics was a liability. It worked. Ashley was fired within days. The final blow came when Sandra's lawyers filed lawsuits against both of them. They were facing charges for embezzlement, fraud, and breach of trust. The evidence was overwhelming, and there was no way out. Ashley tried to call me again, begging for a chance to explain. She claimed she had made a mistake, that she was sorry, that we could fix things. But by then, I saw her for what she really was, a woman who would do anything to save herself. Her tears, her pleas, her so-called apologies, they were all just another performance. Sandra and I stayed focused. Every move we made was calculated and deliberate. And as I watched Ashley and Bob's world collapse around them, I realized something. This was not just about justice. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my trust in myself. They thought they could take everything from me and walk away. They were wrong. The legal battle was exhausting, but when the final verdict came in, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Both Ashley and Bob were convicted. Watching them sit in that courtroom listening to the judge deliver the sentence was surreal. For years, they had believed they could manipulate, steal, and betray without consequences. Now they had to face the fallout. Ashley received a prison sentence that ensured she would not be tasting freedom anytime soon. Bob, on the other hand, had it even worse. Not only was he sent to prison, but his financial debts piled up to the point where even the loan sharks were after him. Rumors started circulating that he owed money to some very dangerous people. If I were him, I would be terrified. But fortunately, I am not him. As for Sandra and me, we walked out of that courtroom knowing we had won. It was not just about the legal victory. It was about reclaiming control over our lives. Sandra was a force of nature throughout the entire process. She was relentless, strategic, and focused, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. If I ever doubted her determination before, I certainly did not now. But life after the trial was not as simple as walking away and pretending everything was fine. There were scars, emotional ones mostly. I went back to my routine, focusing on work and therapy, trying to piece together what came next. My therapist encouraged me to process the grief, not just over losing Ashley, but over losing the life I thought we had built together. It was strange mourning someone who had caused so much pain. Sandra, meanwhile, was focused on Emily. Her daughter was young, but she had already endured more than most adults ever would. Sandra worked tirelessly to provide a sense of normalcy, enrolling Emily in therapy and surrounding her with love and stability. I started spending more time at their house, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Emily was a bright, sweet kid who had a way of making even the darkest days a little lighter. One night, as I was getting ready to leave, she clung to my leg and whispered, "Don't go. What if Daddy comes back?" That moment hit me harder than I expected. Bob had traumatized her in ways I could not fully understand, but I knew I could help. So I stayed. One night turned into 2, then 3. Before I knew it, I was practically living there, helping Sandra with Emily and just being there. People started asking if Sandra and I were a couple, but the truth is we were not, at least not in the way people assumed. There was a bond between us, sure. How could there not be after everything we had been through? But jumping into a relationship after the chaos we had just endured felt wrong. Sandra agreed. We were friends, good friends, but we needed time to heal. As for Ashley and Bob, their lives were in ruins. Ashley's once perfect image was shattered. Gone were the designer clothes, the vacations, and the lavish lifestyle. She was just another inmate now, living a life she never thought she would. Bob, on the other hand, was dealing with the repercussions of his choices both inside and outside of prison. Loan sharks do not forget, and from what I heard, they were making his life a living hell. There was a strange sense of closure in knowing they were paying for what they had done. It did not erase the pain, but it gave me the space to move forward. Sandra and I joked about how poetic it was. 2 people who had tried to destroy us now destroying themselves. I will not pretend everything is perfect now. There are still days when I think about Ashley, about the life we could have had if she had been the person I thought she was. But those moments are becoming fewer and farther between. I am learning to trust again, to believe that not everyone has an ulterior motive. Sandra and I continue to support each other, but we are also carving out our own paths. She is focused on being an incredible mom to Emily, and I am focused on rebuilding the life I want, not the life I had. We are both moving forward, step by step. This whole experience taught me something I will never forget. People will try to take advantage of you, but they can only succeed if you let them. I let Ashley in and she broke my trust, but she did not break me. And now I am stronger because of it, Lenny.